The opening scene of the professor's final lecture is a masterful exercise in atmosphere and foreshadowing. It begins with a slow, almost reverent glide across an empty university lecture hall, the camera lingering on the quiet details, the dust motes drifting in shafts of pale light, the faint echo of footsteps that aren't there, the oppressive silence broken only by the relentless ticking of a clock. The hall, once alive with the energy of learning, now feels like a tomb, a space suspended between memory and oblivion. At the front of the room, a blackboard stands as the focal point, covered in half-erased equations, the last one left unfinished. A single piece of chalk rests on the ledge, dust scattered beneath it as if dropped in haste. There is no one here to witness it, no students, no professor, just the ghost of knowledge lingering in the air. The emptiness is deliberate, a visual metaphor for absence, for the inevitable passage of time that renders even the most profound voices silent. This scene sets the tone for the entire film, a meditation on legacy, on what remains when the speaker is gone. The unfinished equation is not just a mathematical problem. It is the professor's life, his work, his unanswered questions. The ticking clock is both literal and symbolic, counting down to the moment we will later see, his collapse, his final act of completing what he started. The emptiness suggests that no matter how brilliant a mind, no matter how passionate a teacher, time moves forward, rooms empty, and dust settles. Yet, there is also a quiet beauty in this stillness. The lecture hall is not abandoned. It is waiting. The blackboard is not blank. It holds the remnants of thought. The scene whispers that even in absence, something lingers. By the film's end, we understand that this opening was not just a setting, but a prelude to the central question: does anything we leave behind truly last? And the answer, as the story unfolds, is both heartbreaking and hopeful. The opening scene, then, is not just establishing a location. It is establishing a mood, a theme, a question. It invites the audience to step into the silence and listen for the echoes of what once was and what might still be. The flashback to the professor's arrival is a striking contrast to the emptiness of the opening scene. Suddenly, the lecture hall is alive with movement, chatter, and warmth. Students shuffle into their seats, notebooks open, pens poised, as the professor enters with a quiet but commanding presence. He is older, his steps measured, his posture slightly stooped from years of bending over books and blackboards. Yet there's an unmistakable energy in his eyes, the kind that only comes from a lifetime of curiosity. His briefcase, worn at the edges, carries the weight of decades of lectures, notes scribbled in margins, and ideas wrestled into form. When a student calls out, "Professor, will you finish the proof today?" His smile is faint but genuine, tinged with something unspoken. "If time permits," he replies, a simple phrase that, in hindsight, carries the weight of the entire story. At this moment, we don't yet know that time is running out, but the film plants the seed. There's a quiet urgency in the way he moves, as if he's aware that each lecture could be his last. This flashback does more than just introduce the professor. It establishes his relationship with his students, with his work, and with time itself. The way they look at him, not just with respect, but with something approaching reverence, tells us that he isn't merely a teacher. He is a guide, a keeper of knowledge, a man whose life has been spent in pursuit of something greater than himself. And yet, for all his wisdom, he is still mortal, still bound by the same constraints as anyone else. The scene is bathed in soft, golden light, a visual cue that we are stepping into memory, into a moment already past. It's a fleeting glimpse of the professor in his element, before the collapse, before the final struggle, and it makes what comes next all the more devastating. Because now, we've seen him alive, vibrant in his own way, and we understand what will be lost. Most importantly, this moment asks a silent question. What does it mean to teach, to truly leave something behind, when time is the one thing you cannot control? The professor doesn't answer it here. He simply walks to the board, picks up the chalk, and begins, as if he already knows the clock is ticking. The lecture begins not with grand proclamations, but with the familiar sound of chalk against slate, the professor's voice steady, yet charged with quiet intensity. He does not merely recite the lesson, he unravels it, as if each equation is a thread in a vast tapestry he has spent his life weaving. His hands, though aged, move with precision, transforming numbers and symbols into something alive, something that breathes. The students lean forward, some scribbling notes furiously, others simply watching, caught in the gravity of his words. This is more than a lecture. It is the culmination of a lifetime's devotion. As he writes, brief flashes interrupt the scene, glimpses of his younger self hunched over a desk late at night, forehead creased in frustration. The moment a breakthrough came, his face alight with revelation, the quiet satisfaction of a published paper, his name in print, but his mind already chasing the next question. These fragments of memory are not just nostalgia. They are proof that every line on this board was earned, fought for, loved. The professor is not teaching from a textbook. He is teaching from his life. And in doing so, he reveals the most profound truth of academia, of any vocation pursued with passion, that knowledge is not static, but a living thing, passed from one mind to another, shaped and reshaped across time. The equations on the board are not just mathematics, they are his legacy, his imprint on the world. Yet beneath the fervor, there is fatigue, a slight tremor in his hand, a pause to steady himself. He knows, though his students do not, that this lecture is different, that each word is a step closer to an end he has sensed approaching. But he does not stop, because if this is to be his last lesson, he will make it count. The scene thrums with unspoken tension between past and present, between the man and the mind, between the finite body and the infinite ideas it contains. And as the chalk dust falls like snow, we realize this is not just a class, it is a farewell. The moment shatters like glass. 1 second, the professor is mid-sentence, his voice rising with the rhythm of revelation, his chalk dancing across the board in perfect sync with the pulse of his thoughts. The next, his breath catches, a hitch in the cadence so slight most students don't notice at first. Then his left hand spasms against the blackboard, fingers splaying as if trying to grasp something invisible. The chalk snaps between them. A collective inhale sweeps through the lecture hall as the professor staggers. His other hand flies to his chest, not in dramatic fashion, but with the terrible intimacy of someone recognizing a familiar, unforgiving pain. The air changes. The weight of mathematical certainty gives way to something more primal. Yet what's most devastating isn't the collapse itself, but what happens after. Instead of crumpling, the professor braces himself against the board. His knees lock. His whitening knuckles press into the slate hard enough to leave streaks. There's a terrifying clarity in his eyes, not fear but furious calculation. He's solving his final problem. How many minutes remain? How much can I still give? Students half rise from their seats, frozen between instinct and disbelief. Someone shouts for help, but the sound seems distant, unimportant. Because the professor is writing again. His strokes are uneven now, the elegant proofs turning jagged, but the work continues even as his body fails. Every gasp for air becomes a punctuation mark between symbols. This is no longer teaching. This is defiance. The equations unfold not through strength, but through sheer will. Each line a rebellion against the limits of flesh. Each variable a testament to what the mind can demand of the body when legacy hangs in the balance. The classroom watches in silent witness as a man completes his life's work, not in the quiet of a study, but here, surrounded by the next generation, his final act as much about passing the torch as it is about solving the proof. The chalk finally drops, but the hand remains pressed against the board as if he could imprint himself into the very material of his craft. In that suspended moment before help arrives, before the commotion fully erupts, there exists something sacred, the raw, beautiful paradox of human imperfection reaching for something eternal. The world fractures into something luminous and strange. The professor's knees give way, but the fall never comes. Instead, the lecture hall dissolves around him, equations detaching from the blackboard to float like constellations in some private cosmos. Time, that relentless tyrant, loses its grip. The gasps of his students stretch into silence, the scuffling of chairs becomes a distant echo, and for the first time in his life, the professor exists outside the ticking clock. His wife appears, not as memory, but as presence. Her smile the same as when she'd lean over his shoulder to tease him about working too late. She doesn't speak, but her fingers brush the chalk dust from his sleeve, a gesture so familiar it cracks something open in his chest. Then his younger self materializes, bright-eyed and impatient, the man he was before life sanded down his edges. They stand together, these three versions of a life, watching as the unfinished equations begin resolving themselves in midair, numbers arranging into patterns more beautiful than any he'd ever dared imagine. The chalk is back in his hand, though he doesn't remember picking it up. The board stretches infinitely before him, and for the first time he understands, truly understands, the shape of the proof. Not as steps to be followed, but as a living thing, breathing in time with the universe. His strokes come faster now, not from urgency, but from the pure joy of revelation. Somewhere beyond this space, his body may be failing, but here, at last, he is whole. The final symbol completes itself just as the light begins to shift. His wife reaches for him, not to pull him away, but to walk with him into whatever comes next. The last thing he hears isn't the frantic shouts of medics or the beeping of machines, but the soft, resonant click of chalk being set down on a ledge after a lecture well given. The most ordinary of sounds, the most perfect of endings. The lecture hall breathes differently now. The air, once electric with the professor's presence, hangs heavy with absence. Dust motes drift lazily through shafts of fading afternoon light, catching on the edges of the blackboard where his final equation still stands, a silent monument in white chalk against dark slate. The room holds its breath, as if unwilling to disturb the fragile aftermath of something sacred. Then the door creaks open, and reality returns with the shuffle of the janitor's shoes. He moves with the methodical rhythm of routine, humming some half-remembered tune, utterly unaware of the magnitude of what he's about to erase. His rag moves in broad, efficient strokes, and just like that, the professor's last words dissolve into swirling clouds of dust. The chalk ledge is wiped clean, the board restored to blank anonymity, ready for the next day's lessons. There's something almost cruel in the casualness of it. in how easily a lifetime of thought can be reduced to nothing more than a smudge on a cloth. And yet, the equation lingers, not on the board, but in the charged silence that follows, in the way the light still catches the ghostly remnants of chalk that refuse to fully disappear, in the way the janitor pauses, just for a second, as if some echo of the professor's voice has brushed against his subconscious. The room may be empty, but it is not void. Something remains. This is the quiet tragedy and quiet hope of the moment, that even the most profound legacies are at the mercy of time's indifferent march, yet they persist in ways we cannot always see. The board is erased, yes, but the ideas, they have already taken root. The lecture hall is empty, but it is not over. The story continues, even if the professor is no longer here to tell it. The years have turned, but the lecture hall remains. Same wooden desks, same chalk-smudged air, same shaft of afternoon light falling across the blackboard. Yet everything is different. A new professor stands at the front now, her fingers tracing the edge of the board with unconscious reverence. She is younger than he was, her voice steadier, her hands free of tremors. But when she writes, the ghost of his handwriting seems to linger in her strokes. The equation appears again, the same one he died completing. Her students watch, some bored, some enthralled, none aware they're witnessing a resurrection. This, she says, chalk tapping the board, was his gift to us. Not just the proof itself, but the act of passing it on, the unbroken chain of understanding stretching back through time. One of her students frowns at a particularly tricky step, the same way he once did, and in that moment the old professor might as well be standing there again, smiling at the familiar struggle. Outside, autumn leaves brush against the window like pages turning. The cycle continues, not perfectly, not permanently, but persistently. His name isn't on any plaques in this building. His portrait doesn't hang in the halls. His legacy lives instead in this, a woman teaching what she was taught, a proof that outlived its prover, the quiet miracle of an idea surviving its thinker. The camera pulls back through the doorway, the way it once pushed in. The lecture fades into a murmur, then silence. But this time, the emptiness feels different. Not an ending, but a breath held between one voice and the next. The board is full. The work continues. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.